In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the application of method according to some acting students. Hello again, my theater kids. My name is Heather, and welcome back to this series for Theater 5363 Acting Theory in America. We've been talking about different methods and techniques of acting, and today we'll be taking a look at some acting students' reactions to how those methods have been applied. Before we start, let's get our source on. As usual, our source this week is going to be Method Acting Reconsidered, edited by David Krasner. There's going to be a link down in the description if you would like to check the book out for yourself. We'll be taking a look at two different chapters in the book dealing with application of different acting methods. So if you're ready, curtain up and let's get started. We're going to start off with one of the quotes that I found interesting, which was, "People often see more about us than we see about ourselves. That's the very predication of drama." And I made a mental note that this is something that we need to bring up in group discussions working with actors, just to see how they react to that. What do they think that it means? And is acting really about being more than we see in ourselves? So I found that very fascinating just to start off with. But Margolin begins by introducing us to her teacher. She doesn't ever give us a name. She says she couldn't really remember the last name. She doesn't really know how to spell the first name. She was a Russian woman with a small son. She was strong, middle-aged, and she hated actors. So you kind of get the type. I don't know if you've ever worked with a theater teacher like that before. I have before. So she began the session. It was a small class, and she began it by asking the participants to loosen the voice from the held place by having them read a text, and when she'd say switch, they would start talking about a personal experience and then switch and go back to the text. And so you kind of go back and forth with your emotions in the text and your emotions about your personal experience until they start to blend into each other. So this kind of gives you an emotional plateau to start off with. This is one that I think maybe Stanislavski probably would have thought of in his later years. He just kind of looking at where he was going towards the end of his life. That just kind of feels like a type of exercise that he would come up with. It also has a whole lot of shades of Strasberg, in my opinion. Maybe that's just me. So Margolin also talks about her thoughts between theater and performance, which is going to vary by how an actor is connected with the self. She says that theater kind of requires the actor to disappear into a character, but performance creates a layer between the actor and the character. So you can see, here is the actor, here is the character. This thought made me think about a lot of conversations I've listened to before about whether an actor should or shouldn't play a role based off of their experience. And it kind of gives me the impression that she would argue that as long as an actor has a sincere passion for wanting to play the role, an audience can overlook whether or not they are right for the role because they are wearing that transparent layer of enthusiasm and passion, and that's going to color their reaction towards that particular actor. So Margolin goes on to talk about how she became a founding member of the Split Britches Theater Company as a result of meeting two other actors that were in the class. And together they worked on a piece that told the story of forgotten women living in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So the other two members, Shaw and Weaver, they had completely different training going into acting, but they still arrived at the same conclusion on how you create a truthful character, that you have to bridge the gaps in what the text says about the character with your own personal experiences. So this is very much what Adler and Meisner were both talking about, and it still has the inside-out approach, kind of like Strasberg. So again, this just shows what we've been talking about all these weeks, is that there are different parts of all these acting philosophies that you can use for various situations. It's going to depend on the show. It's going to depend on the actor. I just felt kind of validated hearing someone else draw these same conclusions. Now, the method that they came up with to use is what they called multiple choice acting. And this means that you could choose absolutely any source to draw from to deepen the character. Again, this very much sounds like Meisner. You could use effective memory. You could go moment to moment. You could use your actual relationship with someone that's on stage. imaginary circumstances. If you just suddenly feel an emotion, you can go with it. You can switch these on and off throughout an entire performance and jump from one to the other just based off of what you need for that character in that scene. It's good to have a name for this because this is very close to what I've been doing for a lot of years. And it was very nice for me to be able to hear someone actually put it into words. I haven't been able to really describe it before, but I feel like this essay did a good job of kind of putting it into words and breaking down what my brain kind of does every time I take on a role. I also really liked the quote, "We write a play through our acting it." This goes back to what Adler was talking about once the author writes the play, they don't own it anymore. It goes to the actors, and the actors have to be the spoken voice of the author and have to make decisions about how a line is spoken. And that makes a huge difference, the interpretation of the actual written word. So there was a lot in this that I really found relatable, especially the part where she was talking about Strasberg would probably laugh at the thought of how they create a character. Which I really felt that, because I feel like if Strasberg, Adler, Meisner, Stanislavski, if they all could see my mental process in trying to create a character, they would probably question my dedication to the craft. They would probably question my sanity. That's on me. I mean, is there a reason for me to be more methodical? Do I need to put pen to paper to figure it out? I have done that method before. Is it easier for me to just lead with emotion and let the rest follow? Do I just keep going with multiple choice acting? I don't have all the answers because, like I said, it's going to vary depending on the character. So I am always looking forward to trying something new. And that's really kind of what I felt that Margolin was trying to say throughout this essay. Okay, so stay with me on this one because this one was really hard to wrap my brain around. So every time we flipped past this chapter to read something else, I'd always catch that headline and think, man, I need to sit down and read that. So I was, excited about getting to finally take a look at this chapter. So Lobdell challenges the reader to put aside any preconceptions that you have around the method and just approach it as an exercise in fostering connections by fine-tuning your psychological instrument. So he wants to make two major points with this chapter. One is that the method lets actors exist in a paradox, and two, the method allows an actor to create a behavioral metaphor within your character. So to do this, he goes into a discussion of how the actor uses the senses. Now, Strasberg and Stanislavski, their first thing was saying that relaxation is essential because it allows you to be concentrated and to have an energized physicality. And so actors learn step by step how to let energy flow through your body without creating tension. And that's because in everyday life, he points out that tension we use to cut off sensation. But on stage, tension can inhibit any number of necessary stimuli that you're going to need to get a character across. So he suggests replacing sense memory with the term sensory work. This is true because true sensory experiences need more than just your memory. You have to use your imagination to fill in the details. So instead of encouraging students to become completely absorbed on the self and ignore everything else that happens on stage, just naturally react to things, including distractions, and you can acknowledge it or you can move on, but it's all part of the overall concentration. He also says that in exploring sensory work, the teacher needs to honor the actor's privacy, which I absolutely agree with. Everybody's going to have a different take, a different reaction, a different feeling inside of them based off of the same stimuli. And sometimes it's not your job to pull that out of someone. Sometimes they just need to kind of sit with that and acknowledge it and either choose to do something with it or move on. This is kind of where he started to lose me because he started explaining that the teacher has to discourage the miming of an imaginary object because sensory work is all about your nerve endings, but it doesn't communicate actual shape. So I had to sit and think for a while to kind of wrap my mind around that. I wasn't 100% sure what he was trying to explain, but he goes a little further and it made a little bit more sense. He said, if you're teaching students to react to the rain instead of, pretend to put up an umbrella or shake off the rain, just deepen your concentration and think about how that rain feels. How does it feel dripping off your face? How does it feel splashing on your feet? If you move your head to change the angle of the rain, explore that sensation, but still focus on the overall experience. So this helped to make at least a little more sense, kind of let the experience happen to you instead of trying to manipulate the experience with an unnecessary movement. So I could see myself using this with maybe more experienced students. I'm not sure how well this would go over with beginners, but some that have worked more on concentration will probably have an easier time with this. Then he goes into an explanation of the difference between action and task. An action is a character's move towards an objective, and the task is the actor's choice for the character's behavior. So he argues that tasks are going to be more sensory. He used the example of a character opening a letter. Opening a letter is the action. The task is the actor opening it slowly or reacting to a smell, thus creating a metaphor. So the letter has news that stinks like garbage. And this metaphor lets an actor find an individual choice. All the sensory choices made by an actor are going to be private and special objects of their sensory work. He says that sensory tasks have 3 reasons. First of all, they enable the actors to concentrate. They give an active recreation of sensation in the nerves that encourage your actors how to move physically, and they make the actors aware of a movement in order to create a metaphor. So actors are not meant to describe their sensory tasks to others, but just create a character through the task. The imagination and reality had to be present in the actor's attention at the same time. And that's the paradox that the method is training them to obtain. So this was an interesting read. I can see how this application of the method can encourage risk-taking, which is something I still struggle with even after years of doing this. And it can encourage creative courage, which is something that every actor really needs to constantly refine. But overall, this was a difficult read to get through. I kept getting bogged down in all the details, but I did appreciate the emphasis on privacy for the actor. This goes a long way because you want to create a safe space for students to explore and learn. And I also liked the final explanation of picturing a place, that exercise, and how you can at the same time focus on your imagination and divert attention to what is going on around you. And so learning that balance between concentration and reaction is a tough skill, and this chapter kind of helped make that a little bit more clear. So, to be honest, this reading kind of gave me a little bit to think about because in reading how these teachers were applying the method to their own students, had to sit and think about, okay, what are ways, realistic ways that I could boil the method down for, say, children's theater? What are some ways that I can make Meisner easier to understand for high schoolers? This is something that we've been doing for weeks in class, but this kind of highlighted the need of taking different elements of methods and techniques and creating your own approach to them. And I had to stop and think about, okay, what will be my approach? What is it that I want someone to understand about Strasbourg? If I could boil Strasbourg down to the essentials, what do I need beginning actors to understand? And what do I need more advanced actors to understand? So this really kind of made the gears start turning. I realized that I've got a little ways to go in figuring out what's going to work and what doesn't. I know just from years of being on stage how I can take these and apply them to myself, but I do not represent every actor. And so just trying to find a way to word things towards people who are going to learn in different ways. This is something that I'm going to have to sit down and really think about. If someone doesn't understand Adler, what's a different way that I can go about it? If someone doesn't understand Stanislavski, what is a different way I can go about that? So this kind of highlights the way that there, as someone brought up in another one of our readings, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There is more than one way to teach Meisner. There's more than one way to teach Strasbourg. And finding out what works and what doesn't, there's going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of observation. And so I'm just hoping and praying that I am up to the challenge once I get in front of a classroom of beginning students or even more advanced students, depending on the situation, or in a classroom full of children. What am I going to do if I have first and second graders? How am I going to apply this to them? So this kind of shows that there are different approaches, there are different methods, and there are different parts of these techniques that you want them to get out of this. What is the overall lesson that I need them to learn? And then figure out what's the best way to go about that. It may not be following Strasbourg word for word, but if they get the same idea out of it, then that may be a lot more important than doing it exactly the way that he did it. So definitely a lot to think about here with taking these techniques and methods and actually applying them to the classroom setting. A lot to think about here. So there you go. Those are the readings for this week. I hope you found this informative and helpful. Why don't you let me know about it down in the comments below? Be sure that you stay tuned for the rest of this series, and I will see you next time. And scene.